Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. Here's your host, Paul Winkler.
And welcome. This is the Investor Coaching Show. I'm Paul Winkler, talking about the world of money and investing. Jay, whoever was on this mic was shorter than me. I got it. All right. Yes, actually, sitting in the studio today, it seems like I was here forever, and then forever I've been gone from the actual studio in downtown. So actually, I've got a lot of things to talk about and things that I want to just cover today. And, some of the things I'm going to be talking about, some meetings that had taken place during the week, and I figured it'd be kind of fun to walk through some of these things. And just say, JR sent me. So what JR sent me, he's always sending me articles. Seven simple portfolios have beat the S&P 500 for more than 50 years. And yeah, of course, because when you invest, you have this concept of investing. This won the Nobel Prize in economics, and it's different factors of investing. And a lot of big mutual fund companies have basically said, we will not follow the research because investors won't stick with it. And I think actually, JR, what you sent me is that's what the guy said. He was literally just talking about various portfolios and says the problem is most people won't stick with it. You get into these conversations with people and they hear about total market portfolios or, these funds that are designed to be, you're retiring in the year 2040, you just put all your money here and you don't have to think about it. But they typically track what most people hear about on radio and TV, the Dow, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, large U.S. stocks, large U.S. stocks, large U.S. stocks. And, you think about it, who would have to pay the least to use your money? Large U.S. companies. Why? Because they're big. They don't need to pay a lot. So you'll pay a high price for the earnings that you get. So hence what ends up happening is you end up with historically much lower returns. And you think, well, I've got some returns, right? Yeah. And it's what you leave on the table that is so often the problem because you're trying to desperately outpace inflation as an investor because inflation is, like it or not, good grief. You go back to the 1970s and you could buy a house for $30,000. Perish the thought now. It's not going to happen. So you really want to more handily outpace inflation, and that area of the market doesn't do it quite as well. So yeah, these portfolios, which add in value companies and, making sure that the problem is you can't just do value. You got to really watch that term, value. Because value companies are companies that have very, very low prices compared to their book values, and most value funds don't do that. If you look at value funds, they're kind of in between growth and value. They're in between in that little crack, and what ends up happening is you end up with lower returns simply because you're paying more for every dollar of earnings, and more importantly, every dollar of book value. And there was something actually, so I was going through, one of the guys in my office says, hey, have you seen this program? And I said, no, but you know what? You and I will talk about it on the radio because I don't watch TV. I don't watch any of the programs out there because, quite frankly, it's depressing to watch, too much on TV or too much on the internet because there's so much bad information. And you go into... I attended a really fascinating workshop this week, as a matter of fact, on that particular topic. And it was on depression, anxiety, the internet, and getting information online. I think it was it Einstein that says information isn't knowledge? I think that was a paraphrase, but there's so much information. And we thought, the information age, it'll make life easier, won't it? We have more information. And what ended up happening is people end up paralyzed by too much information, and they don't know what to do. It's like going into a store. I went into a store this week, and they had all of these flavors of these, this kind of a protein shake it was. And I was just kind of looking at it. I was there for something else. I was, looking at some things, and I was in there. I looked at all those shakes, and I go, how does anybody choose? There are like 200 of them. And you just look at it and go, I don't even know. And that's exactly it. You have like 30,000 mutual funds out there. How do you choose? You have 200,000 or something like that, crazy sub-accounts inside of annuity products. And you go, how do you, it's just paralysis. And what this lady was talking about said, it was the information age. It was supposed to make us all happier and healthier and wiser. And she said, and this lady's a therapist, she goes, as a therapist, what I see all the time are people that don't feel good enough. They don't feel up to it. They always feel like there's something wrong with them and maybe that they're lacking and that they're not enough, is the way she put it. And she says, if you go online and let's say you're trying to research a particular topic, and she said, you can go in and research that topic till the cows come home. Will you ever get to the end of all the information? And she says, no. Obviously, no. You are never going to get to the end of the information. And says, so when you go online and you're looking for information, or you're going in social media, or you're going to research something, or whatever, and she says, you don't feel like you're good enough, you don't have enough, and guess what? She said, you're right. You are right. You will never be pretty enough. You will never be smart enough. You will never have enough money. You will never have any. And so what happens is people feel this absolute, just anxiety first, she said. She says, you feel anxious because you just recognize that you don't know enough, you can't have enough, and you're not enough, and all of that. And then she says, then what does it lead to? Like, well, depression, right? Yeah. Because depression is anxiety with hopelessness. And then she says, then what does that lead to? And I'm like, I don't know, what does that lead to? And she said, apathy. Apathy is what it leads to. After a while, you just go, I don't know. I can't know. I'm not good. Forget it. I'm just going to tune out. And that's what happens with people with investing. People went through the Great Depression and they saw people lose a tremendous amount of money. They didn't recognize that literally if you were an investor during the Great Depression, mind you, an 80% decline in the S&P 500, 80% decline. Your $100,000 is, if you had it, was $20,000. What most people don't recognize is you were back to that by the end of 1936. But what did most people do? They became anxious, they became depressed, and then they became apathetic. And then what they did is, then you have a whole generation, they do nothing but invest in CDs. And you take $1 in treasury bills back in 1926, that dollar is now $22. Yippee! Where it's $14,000 in large U.S. stocks. It's $30,000 in small U.S. stocks. It's like $120,000 in small value stocks. $22. And so that's why most investors go, forget it, I can't do this stock market thing, it's just terrible. And yeah, you're right. And we end up at the end of ourselves pretty quickly. And I'll just tell you a couple of things that she said I thought that were just really, really good. Has nothing to do with investing, by the way. Well, it does. It sort of, but it doesn't. Because this is life. She said hobbies are life-saving, number one. And I thought it was interesting because she says, here's what happens is we have things that we know we're okay at, we're good at. Remember, that's where we don't feel like we're just overwhelmed. Because we're overwhelmed when we go online or we go into our programs or we go into social media. It's overwhelming. I can't get to the bottom of all this information. And then she says, then you have on another axis. So on one axis is, what my abilities are. And the other one is, let's say the x-axis. The y-axis would be my abilities. X would be the task that's in front of me. Now, when those two things are equal, she said, we're good. We're happy. And this is the key to happiness, by the way. This is really, really cool stuff. Well, there's more to happiness than this, but this is one of them, is making sure those two are in concert with each other. So she said, here's what's going on is if you would back away from social media and online stuff and all of those types of things. Let's say that you had a Saturday that you had nothing to do and you couldn't get online, you couldn't get on your phones, you couldn't do anything like that. What would you be doing? And some people are like, well, I'd be cleaning my room. I'd be going and I would go and kayak. One guy said, I would go out fishing. I would go camping. I would go walk my dog. And there was any number of things that these people said. I would go play music, whatever. And said, look, those are all things that you're perfectly within your capabilities. And that is why when people walk away, there's an interesting study that if you do this stuff more than a half hour a day, that what happens if you'll drop back to a half hour a day, let me put it a different way. If you'll drop back to a half hour, depression reduced significantly, anxiety reduced significantly, sense of purpose, sense of well-being increased, all of those types of things. And what happens is we get out there and we see this garbage on investing that is just wrong, and then we get frustrated. And we recognize that there's never enough that we can know. And I was just reading through Wall Street Journal. It had this thing about investing. And article after article after article, the information was just blatantly wrong. One of the first ones was how to invest in the S&P 500. Like we need a tutorial on how to invest in the S&P 500. There are hundreds probably of index funds out there that you can do that. But why would I want to invest all my money in an area of the market that would have lowest or one of the lowest long-term expected returns? Well, why? Because we hear that it's good. Why do we hear that it's good? Because a fund that invests in large U.S. stocks that just buys and hangs on to them historically has better returns than ones that buy and sell and trade and get in and get out. And that's what you've always heard me talk about, the idea of market efficiency, right? In other words, trying to figure out which stocks are underpriced, buy them, and when they go up to the price that they're supposed to be at and then sell them is the way to make money. No, it's not. Companies have to pay to use your money. Those companies historically go up in value regardless of whether you have the right ones or not, if you just own them all. Now, why the S&P 500? Because of familiarity bias, of what we're familiar with as Americans. I know the big U.S. companies. So hence, I feel comfortable with them. I don't know this little international Japanese value company. I don't even know who they are. I can't even pronounce their name. So I wouldn't even think about investing in them. But as investors, what happens is we miss out on these returns. And we do that because we miss out on them because what we're doing is we're just doing what everybody else is doing. It's follow the herd. And, it's like Warren Buffett was talking. Warren Buffett was talking the other day about this. And he says, the gambling instinct is hard. I mean, he was just talking about Bitcoin. He was talking about Bitcoin. And he was just talking about how people, I don't know when it's going to go down. I don't know when the gambling instinct is going to go away. He said, to me, the lottery doesn't make sense either, but people find ways to, justify doing it. The government finds all kinds of ways to make money on it. We know roulette wheels aren't a good idea. So the better idea is own one. Don't be a player. Own one. And what happens, though, is we see other people, out there on the internet talking about how great they are and how wealthy they are and all of this. Or we hear about somebody that hits it big on something and then they get lucky and then all of a sudden envy kicks in. As Buffett is just, sometimes you love him, like him, hate him, whatever, but sometimes he's just very folksy. And he makes a lot of sense when he talks about these types of things. But he says people fly thousands of miles. They'll fly thousands of miles to do something that doesn't make sense. They go and bet on football games, bet on sports, and then what happens? All these different states have lotteries now, and you don't even need to throw the game anymore when it comes to you can make money on gambling just because the house wins every time. Is that you just need to make sure the spread's big enough. And we know to the bottom of our hearts, we know that getting rich quick and trying to hit it big doesn't make sense. It's not good. We got, thousands of years of wisdom that says that's not a good idea. But yet we still do that. And his philosophy is get rich slow. That's the way you do it. Don't be impatient. Don't be worrying about what the market's going to do over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. He says, I'm thinking 10 years. And here's a guy in his 90s thinking 10 years, which is funny.